welcome to Going Together. My name is Ari, the girl on the go, the girl you just got to know. Welcome to another episode of Going Together. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're all well. As for me, I am having a bit of a speedy recovery, all thanks to God, of course. And not gonna lie, I am absolutely looking forward to spring-summer season. I'm just over the cold weather. I'm over the colds and flus. I'm over the layering. I'm ready. I'm so ready to welcome spring with its general warmth and whimsical energy. Another thing that makes me love the spring-summer season is definitely having longer days, which always buys me an hour or two extra when I'm out with friends, because I just prefer being out during daytime. And I know I might get side-eyed for that as someone in their 20s, but it turns out most of my inner circle shares the same sentiment, okay? So clearly there's no shame in this daytime preference as a 20-something-year-old. Talking about inner circles, this year has actually brought with it a cute comeback when it comes to my social life. I feel like for the first time in a very long time, I'm starting to really lean into the blessing of having people in my life who continually choose me, people who've witnessed me evolve over the years and just loved me through it all. People who chose to stay, man. People who remain intentional in building a life with me. These are people I hold so dear to my heart and feel so blessed to share this lifetime with, And that's what I want to get into in today's episode. I want to speak about the importance of community in our 20s, how some communities are inherited, how we get to choose our own as we grow older, the benefits of having communities and the disappointment that we might feel within some of these communities that we pick ourselves, and even the ones that we are born into. Before I get into that, I thought it would be a good idea to maybe just share what the definition of community is, just so that we're all on the same page about what I'm referring to whenever I use that word in today's episode. And according to the Cambridge Dictionary, it defines community as the people living in one particular area or people who are considered as a unit because of their common interests, social group, or nationality. Okay, so that's the definition, right? Meaning that community could range from people in your neighborhood to family to friends to run clubs, the art community, and many more kinds of units you choose to become a part of as you get older and develop new interests, move to new places, and all of that. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's get into it. I have to admit that my sudden interest in just community in our 20s has been sparked by the way this year has really brought to the forefront, I guess, the importance of community to me, especially amidst all the changes that have happened towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Now more than ever, I've really started to see how having a community of people who love and support us, be it family, friends, mentors, neighbors, even colleagues, it's just so important, especially in this decade where there's a lot of uncertainty, changes in career, a reckoning with our faith. Maybe all of a sudden we're faced with new financial responsibilities. Maybe some of us are talking marriage, kids, and witnessing our lives evolve into something new. Something that I believe is one of the things that can really help keep us grounded through all of that is being a part of a community. I think I already tried to stress this in an earlier episode titled Self-Preservation versus Self-Absorption. In it, I speak about how reaching out to others and maintaining contact with our communities is essential to living a truly fulfilling life as opposed to shutting everyone out when experiencing some of life's challenges. I also think it's important to have people who accept you as you are and are ready to support you when times are tough and celebrate you when you're finally starting to win. I found that having that sense of belonging and different perspectives to some of the things we go through really goes a long way. Oh, and I also just enjoy being challenged and inspired. It's just one of those other benefits of community that I really appreciate, because our 20s are there's such a pivotal time where a lot of us are starting to bravely pursue our dreams, try out new career paths, or even carve out our own. Having people to cheer us on, pray for us, and hold us accountable could be really what keeps us going on tough days. And you know what? Sometimes just sharing a laugh, a hug, or that, hey, wanna go for a hike text from a friend, it could do so much for you. It could really be exactly what you need when you're going through that weird period. For instance, when this year began, I was faced with so much uncertainty, and I felt this huge weight of responsibility over how the next chapter of my life would turn out. Although a part of me was, I guess, to some degree, emotionally prepared for what I was going through, but still, man, it meant the world to have friends and family to confide and lean on as I settled into this new life, you know? Now, I'm sure by now we're all aware that although it's so great to have cool and amazing chosen communities that consist of close friends and all, the thing is, we don't get to choose some of the communities we end up in. For example, our families. We inherit them and the communities they're part of. So if you are born into a church-going family, you're going to be a church-going kid. And pretty much all the other activities that they participate in and they deem important, you're going to be there. You're going to be part of the communities your parents or guardians are a part of because they want you to be a part of them. And those are the communities that we end up spending most of our formative years with. They're the ones that influence our perception of the world and the people in it from very early on. These are communities that I can say set some sort of standard for us when it comes to deciding what is acceptable and what isn't. Our identities then tend to mold according to how repetitively and intently those standards are imposed on us. We may mold ourselves for survival. We may mold ourselves to belong, just because that's what communities really, essentially reinforce, right? The molding of self. And these different communities then, each in their own way, shape how we think about belonging, shape our ideas of belonging. The truth of the matter is, when we're younger, we are more impressionable and we will pick up on what our caregivers value and praise. And due to our innate need for love and belonging, we may conform without critique, because after all, during our formative years, a lot of us believe that since our parents, grandparents, whoever's taking care of us is older than us, they're therefore wiser. Not to forget that we're obviously at their mercy as well, and it's literally their jobs to raise us in whatever way they see best fit, you know? And in most cases, they're not. Critique is actually, it's just expected to be kept to oneself until you can fend for yourself, you know? If you're in a family that says, okay, we don't do ABC in here, you don't do ABC too. And then you're told that if you try, you're going to have to fend for yourself. You're going to have to live in a different roof, because we don't do that here. And because of that, we just become so conditioned to believe from early on that in order to belong and survive, you need to adapt to some level of sameness. You need to submit to authority without question. This is not to say that this makes for a completely terrible community. We may still derive some sort of positive influence and fulfillment within them, no matter how complicated. In fact, we may grow up to still appreciate our inherited communities despite our disapproval of how some of the things are done. For instance, maybe now that we're older, we may have a harder time accepting some of the ways in which our inherited communities treat people of a different class or race. We can have a hard time trying to continue fitting in spaces that seem very, like they just reject constructive criticism, especially if it's directed at those in leadership. And once we start to realize our agency and freedom to make our own decisions, we might start evaluating the living conditions and the values of the communities we inherited. Although that may sometimes prove to be a difficult process, it's a necessary one and is likely to yield some sort of clarity and way forward that caters for the person you're becoming and the life you want to build. Which brings me to my next point about how this decade, being in our 20s, it just gives us more agency over who surrounds us. We get to choose our own communities based on our values, interests, personalities, faiths, political views, and many other shared values. This could be experienced at a more grand scale in higher education institutions and maybe trickle in a bit in workplaces, but it's definitely not restricted to those spaces. Gym, park runs, hiking clubs, faith-based communities are all examples of potential communities we get to choose for ourselves, and as such, provide more opportunity for connection and enforce some sense of belonging. The cool and fun part here is we kind of get to suss out for ourselves and decide for ourselves if the community is worth being a part of. It's up to us to choose whether we want those people in our lives or not. When wisely picked, our chosen communities can truly serve as spaces to encourage self-discovery and provide opportunity to enjoy being around those that see you, hear you, and value you. In those instances, we will find that our identity and values are shaped in positive ways. We gradually become versions of ourselves we aspire to be, alongside our chosen support system, which is made up of people who challenge you in positive ways and help you navigate your 20s feeling a little less alone through consistent support and unconditional love. The beautiful thing about that is, the more of that you receive, the more of that you will end up giving back to your community, which in turn maintains the core identity and the values of that chosen community. I think for this part of the episode, I need to take some time to give the faith-based communities in my life their flowers, both the inherited ones and the chosen ones. These are communities that have really helped me see the love of Jesus in action. And throughout my 20s, they've provided the support and guidance that I very much needed during my difficult student days, from powerful and life-changing sermons, as well as worship experiences, to weekly Bible study groups that welcomed the endless questions that arose in my faith journey. I have been blessed time and time again to be surrounded by young people who, just like me, were determined to live their lives within spaces and communities that reminded them of the importance of a God-led life. Despite the stumbling and the falling that may happen in our faith journeys, one thing we have in common is a deep knowing that true fulfillment in life is only found in Christ, which is probably why most of us always find ourselves back in our faith-based communities, because that's where life makes a bit more sense, no matter what season we find ourselves in. I'd also like to add that as a young Christian who's experienced life within a Christian community during the majority of their 20s, I'd say because of how challenging the faith journey may prove to be, as you let go of your old ways and identity, it is a lot better to go on that journey together with the support and the leadership provided by the Christ-centered communities available to you. These communities may be inherited, like the family churches we grew up in, but maybe no longer available to us due to us changing locations and leaving the family home for school, work, or other reasons, which then leaves us with the responsibility of choosing our own faith-based communities in the locations that we find ourselves in. This may happen earlier and a bit later for others, but it usually becomes up to us then to choose which communities are we going to be a part of. Big decision. And it's so big that sometimes parents might even advise us to leave it alone and just do our faith in solitude while away from home. And you know what? I get them. Because although my experience of my chosen faith-based community after leaving home worked out well, it's not guaranteed for everyone, and that's why I do, in this case, agree with our parents and elders when it comes to taking that decision very seriously, because things aren't always what they seem, and a little caution might need to be exercised before committing to any community, really. This is because some of us, as we are in these new locations, right, and we don't have the same support system we grew up having, we might desperately and naively join certain communities without much thought, which then becomes a potential threat to us because of how these communities gradually shape our identity and values even further. And if they happen to have sinister or problematic hidden agendas, we might find ourselves in trouble or simply disappointed. Yes, unfortunately, chosen communities can still disappoint us. The thing is, just because we're now big girls and boys and we have the agency to choose communities for ourselves, that doesn't mean we'll get it right the first time around. There will be definitely some hits and some misses. The thing about life is, every time we put ourselves out there, we expose ourselves to being potentially rejected, used, overlooked, or even ending up feeling lonely despite our attempts to create or become a part of a community. We may obliviously join a community that is of a higher social class than the one we belong to and end up feeling rejected when we're really invited to hangouts, or we might choose to be part of a very large community where our opinion and voice altogether is not heard or valued because of some sort of underlying prejudice. There's also the pain of being part of a community and realizing that we just can't seem to connect and find that feeling of belonging that we're seeking, despite everything looking okay at face value. Some of us may be tempted to stay, despite the signs that the communities that we've chosen are not the best suited for us, despite our intuition gently warning us against it. It might be due to an image we're trying to uphold for others, the fear of being alone, the struggle to admit our choice may have not been the right one, or other self-convincing reasons. The sad thing is, we're actually doing ourselves a huge disservice when we settle for just being in a community just for the sake of being surrounded, yet sacrificing the aspects of truly belonging, truly being seen and accepted as you are. I think this is one of the ways we sort of delay the possibility of us finding better fitting communities for ourselves, because instead of pulling away from spaces and people that drain us and threaten our authentic selves, we further expose ourselves to hurt and disappointment. Whereas we could have just taken a minute to pause, maybe even thug out a bit of a lonely season, just because you actually believe that there's better out there for you, because guess what? There is. And you being alone for a while it's not going to be the end of your world. At least you won't be abandoning yourself in the process of being surrounded and wanting to, perform community instead of actually enjoy it. Because let's be honest, some of us are genuinely disillusioned with certain lifestyles that are praised in certain communities, yet we continue to stay. Some of us are just no longer interested in putting up the performances to maintain an image. So what are we doing? Life alone is just so hectic enough as it is that all of that self-abandoning will eventually catch up with us if we don't reconsider some of the decisions we've made when it comes to our chosen communities. Now, me being me, I'll always bring it back to Jesus. I will surely bring it back to God, our Creator. Because listen, the God I serve is an all-knowing God. And there's absolutely nothing He cannot help us with. And I just noticed also how the more I prioritize belonging in His presence, belonging to Him, the less desperate and willing to settle I've just become, I've noticed how intimacy with God really will change the game. It will, because it will have you step into a more grounded and less performative version of yourself. You start to just stop auditioning yourself for acceptance from others, and you have this new kind of rationality that allows you to choose from a place of peace and clarity, choosing and becoming part of communities that are a lot more suited for you, and having a more ability to just stand back, pause a little, assess, and make sure that when you do choose to become a part of a community, it is actually a well-thought decision that helps you create the life that you're proud of. And this is obviously not something that happens overnight or without any practical action. There are things that we discover and learn through this pursuit with God that better equips us when it comes to actively choosing our communities. I'm going to share some of the things that I'm discovering and learning during my 20s when it comes to, creating and choosing, communities that just suit me better. Okay, number one out of the three, actually, I've got just three things that I'm learning, I'm discovering as I am navigating community in my 20s. And number one on the list of three is learning to be healthy in community. Check yourself, check your character. Are you someone who's selfish? Are you someone who's maybe unreliable? Are you easily offendable? Stuff like that can really affect your experience of your chosen communities. So it's important to really, not be quick to jump into conclusions and assume that, if a chosen community is disappointing you or is not working how you thought, it's important for you to sit back and also check yourself, as opposed to always being the person that's yeah, they think they're better, yeah, this, yeah, that, but no. What about you? And communicating your boundaries, that could really help avoid a lot of misunderstandings. Mention if you can't make it every day of the week, if you can't, contribute as financially as much as you are expected to. It's okay to speak out for yourself, as opposed to just being silent about things. And now there's misunderstandings happening, and people maybe just having the wrong impression and you having the wrong impression, and then now you're hopping from one community to another because you're just someone who assumes people will read your mind. Let's not do that. And let's also approach conflict with a bit more emotional intelligence, know when to grow, know when conflict is an opportunity for you to, maybe learn a thing or two, or when to leave. Because sometimes, yeah, in a community, you might find that, oh, there are some, underlying like values that you weren't aware of, or ways of doing things that you weren't aware of, that you pick up on. You're like, I'm a bit uncomfortable about this. And as opposed to staying and being uncomfortable the whole time, I'm going to leave, And obviously, if the community is reasonable enough to receive your communication around that, go for it. If not, that's also fine. Remember, you literally can choose to leave. Number 2 on the list of 3 is reciprocity. I don't know if I think I am saying it right though. But yeah, community is reciprocal. It's not just about who will choose me, but also about how am I showing up. Remember, when we seek out communities to belong, we should not be so fixated about being chosen, but we should also ask ourselves, how am I showing up? Am I showing up as the version of myself that's desperate for validation? Or am I showing up as my true self, open to learning more about myself and others in the context of community? That really is important, like if you're coming into a community in a space and you realize that, okay, it runs on this kind of approach, energy, and you also then check yourself, am I able to show up in that way? Can I keep it running with them? And once you answer that, you become somebody who will be able to contribute to the community you've joined. You'll be able to share your opinions and creative ideas to improve things, as opposed to shrinking and maybe not even showing up in the way you potentially could, simply because you're too worried about people's perception of you. Lastly, access. Being intentional about our access. Who access us, who gets to see us ugly cry, who gets to see us vulnerable. And yeah, like, it's important for us to not assume that just because we're in this big grand community, everyone now needs to have access to all of us. No, I think as I'm growing older, that's what I'm learning. I'm learning that just like we did in high school, where you would gravitate towards people that made more sense. If like maybe you were someone who's an academic, you'd probably, gravitate towards academic people, or I don't know, just some level of common ground would be there. But I think as we grow older, like, it becomes even more intentional because of our experience, emotional intelligence, and things like that, So yeah, then you're able to sustain, relationships within communities, because you're creating them with people that make sense for you, people that are worth extra attention, are worth the vulnerability. And yeah, a lot of that really, again, goes back to your qualities and the values that you value, like the values that matter to you, because an easy way to spot our people is just by being people who have made up their minds about their core values and the qualities that we appreciate. If you're solid enough as a person, you're most likely to attract solid people, like-minded people you're compatible with. This then easily helps us answer the question, what kind of community do I want? Because we become so aware of the people we are becoming, and we also are aware of the people we're choosing to become around. Because that's important, that's really important for us to really take our inner circle seriously and understand that regardless of how big a community is, you don't have to be everybody's cup of tea. Just be as you can be in that season of your life, and the people that are best suited to walk this journey with you will walk with you, will go together with you. You get me. Okay, those are my 2 cents. I hope they are of some worth to you. I hope you've been encouraged. If you're still looking for your tribe, remember to get your house in order first. Let's first get it all sorted out with ourselves. Like, obviously we're not going to be perfect and 100% like, great human beings. Just because I don't think communities are necessarily seeking us to be perfect people, but we at least need to be grounded enough and solid enough people to coexist and build lives with other people. So let's try to do that. Like I said, for me, God is the way to go about it, just belonging in that sacred place, at his feet, that's where I think a lot of clarity and wisdom will come for you in your pursuit of community in your 20s. And for those who've settled in with their people, those who are content with their inner circle, don't forget to remind your people how much you love and appreciate them. Of course, they too are just worthy of you continue showing up for them just as they show up for you. So let's keep that consistency going. And as for inherited communities, look, I know as we grow older, some of those relationships may become strained due to some differences, a difficult past. But let's try to approach the relationships with grace and maturity while we work towards healing and reconciliation. Also, I'm sure there's so much more to unpack when it comes to the realities of community in our 20s, such as the power dynamics, the nuances, the evolution of certain communities as we grow older, and the general complicated experience all of us are bound to have depending on our backgrounds and life's experiences. Today's episode was just me simply touching on some of the ways I've been thinking about it, and I hope it inspires you in some way to reflect on your own take of what community means to you in this decade and how to better set yourself up for a rewarding experience when it comes to that. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to another episode of Going Together. Till next time, stay blessed.